We're so glad to have you. I know that you're still Representative Talarico. I know you still have a district to represent, and let's say that, no pun intended, that's the elephant in the room. Why we want to leave your district that you've represented so well and move over to the new district in Travis County?
Well, I did, of course, didn't want to leave my district. As you know, I was one of only two members of the legislature to be gerrymandered out of my district. And for those that don't know what that term is, it's kind of the political partisan redrawing of maps. Hopefully one day in Texas, we can get rid of this conflict of interest where politicians draw their own district lines and we put it in the hands of a nonpartisan, citizen-led, independent redistricting commission like a lot of other states do. But unfortunately, we're not there yet. And right now, we draw our own maps. And when politicians draw the maps, we play political games. And so I was targeted, and my district got destroyed. But I was thankful that the seat next door in House District 50 was opening up, and it happened to be the district where I grew up. So it's where
I lived. Wells Branch area, is that right?
That's right. I lived there for 20 years. Went to Wells Branch Elementary, graduated from McNeil High School, and still worship at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church. So,
that's wonderful.
If I'm going to get redistricted out, at least I get to come home, and it's been wonderful to be back home.
Well, I think we saw on the news last night that the early voting has begun, of course, and the first day's turnout was about almost 0.5% in Travis County. What do you think about the turnout so far?
Yeah, it's a midterm, so you always kind of see less turnout than in presidential years. There's also not a lot of hot competitive races at the top of the ticket. If you think about the 2020 Democratic primary, there was a hotly contested presidential race here in Texas between Senator Sanders and Vice President Biden and Senator Warren. So we don't have anything like that this time around. So it's going to be hard to drive turnout. That's why our campaign in House District 50 is knocking on more than 20,000 doors and contacting every voter in the community to make sure that we boost turnout as much as possible in our neck of the woods. Well,
I can tell you that having once worked for Senator Barrientos, that the Wells Branch community does turn out to vote.
That's right. That's exactly right. And my mother used to be the precinct chair for precinct 229, right there in the middle of Wells Branch, and she's not wealthy, she's not influential, she's not famous. She's just a person who feels like it's her duty to take part in democracy at the local level. And so I learned a lot from her. I went to precinct meetings when I was young, and it's when I realized that, in a democracy, if you show up, you have the ability to make tremendous change, and showing up is half the battle. So
yes.
I hope people do the same thing in this election before March 1st.
Well, would you be willing to comment a little bit on kind of what your primary issues, well, no pun intended again, your main issues are in your effort to get elected to represent District 50?
Yeah, well, my background is in education. Before I was a politician, I was a middle school teacher. And so I taught 6th grade language arts on the west side of San Antonio, which is a beautiful, historic Mexican-American neighborhood, and also one of the poorest zip codes in the state of Texas. So my students face tremendous systemic challenges and obstacles in their path to living a fulfilling life. And so I did a good job in room 112 at Rhodes Middle School, but I was only impacting 150 kids in one subject in one school year. And I realized that if I loved my students like I thought I loved my students, that I needed to make a much bigger impact than I could in my classroom. And it meant working for systemic change, because my students were being held back, not just by the education system, but also the economic system, the justice system, our healthcare systems. These were all working together to hold my students back and hold their families back, hold their neighborhood back. And so I left the classroom and led a local nonprofit that put technology into classrooms and tried to change how we teach our students. And then when a seat in the legislature opened up in Round Rock, where I lived, I ran for the seat. I was 28 years old, had never run for anything before, but I knew that most education policy was crafted at the state legislature, not in Congress, and not at the school board level. It was done at the state level, and so that's where I wanted to be. And now I sit on the Public Education Committee, and I went from impacting 150 kids at Rhodes Middle School to writing policy for 5.5 million Texas school children. And obviously a lot more work left to do, but proud to be doing this for our students.
Well, thank you for that. But I must ask, since we're the Texas Public Employees Association, how you might translate your interest in those that serve, in the education area, and they are public servants, to those who, for example, in the recent ice storm, who've gone out and made our roads safe, gone out and kept our whole state secure during the pandemic. And we've lost over 100 prison guards. They died due to COVID. We've had thousands of them contract COVID at one time or another in these closed environments, in state-supported living centers, and in the state hospitals, and in the prisons. And so those folks are keenly interested in knowing that, what a candidate like yourself, who has shown an interest in the public sector, how you might, what you might feel about supporting state employee issues too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of overlap here, because the way our educators are treated in Texas is how we treat a lot of our public sector employees and our public servants, who wake up every day and try to make our state and our communities better. Underpaid, undervalued, disrespected, and in retirement, treated even more poorly than they were when they were on the job. And so, I've done a lot of work both for retired teachers, but also for our retired state employees, as well as our public servants who are still in the field. So you mentioned the recent ice storm. I'm actually here at the Capitol, and I'm across the street, but I was in the Capitol just a second ago for a hearing on the blackout last year, where 702 Texans died because of the grid failure. And we're actually hearing testimony from public employees and emergency personnel, and how they struggle to respond without much support at all from the state. And so, during that blackout, I actually led, an effort to ensure that our nursing homes, our state-supported living centers were protected. I also did the same thing during the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of you may remember that in the early stages of that pandemic, I organized a bipartisan letter, actually, which are pretty rare these days, a bipartisan letter demanding that Governor Abbott take certain steps to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 in our state-supported living centers, and to ensure that our employees in those centers were being paid appropriately for the time they were putting in, and were given the right equipment to keep themselves safe. Governor Abbott eventually took those steps because of our letter. So I'm proud to have led on this issue of supporting our public sector employees, whether it's in the schoolhouse or whether it's in our neighborhoods or on our streets during a disaster.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you very much. Let's drill down a little bit. One of the issues that is of concern to, you mentioned the retirees. At least the retired teachers have had some sort of increase. They've had about 3 or 4 increases in the last 20 years. But in those last 20 years, while inflation was somewhat low, it has now picked up again. And the value of a dollar, of the pension dollar, is probably devalued by 35 to 40%. So they are keenly interested in seeing some sort of annuity increase. And they need to know that the legislature will support that, and of course making sure that ERS is crossing the threshold of actuarial soundness, but that they will then give a strong and clear message to ERS: hey, it's okay to go ahead and give an increase to these retirees.
Yeah, and I have been on the record as supporting that since I first ran for office. When I represented Williamson County, I represented perhaps more retired state employees and ERS members than any other legislator. In my new district in House District 50, I'll probably have a very similar percentage of ERS members in my district. And so this is something very personal to me and something very relevant to the communities that I represent. And so, yeah, you mentioned, we've made some progress for retired teachers. Of course, we still got to make a lot more progress for them too. They haven't had a cost of living and adjustment in decades, but you're absolutely right that next in line is our retired state employees, because our ERS members have been neglected in the legislature over the past few decades. And it's time to right that wrong and ensure that we are honoring our promises that we make to our public servants and honoring the contributions they've made to the state. They deserve to be taken care of in their retirement, and they deserve to see that annuity increase and that cost of living adjustment made.
The similar question then comes up for current employees who haven't seen an across the board raise. Now, there have been some targeted raises at particular agencies, and there have been subsets of employees who've gotten some increases in areas where there's they're critical areas. But there are a lot of critical areas now that we've had COVID, and now that we have we've had the freezes, and we may have more. So, and the hurricanes, et cetera. So, what can you do as a legislator to help bring about a pay raise, an across the board pay raise for state employees who haven't seen one since September, and effectively haven't seen one since September of 2014? And again, because inflation is now kicked up again, you can imagine the turnover is going to pick up too.
Yeah, I completely agree. The reason I stepped out of the Capitol and came to this building across the street is so that I could make a statement like this one, which is that we have to elect public servants who believe in the potential of government and the potential of our public servants who work in our state and local governments. It's so strange to me that we elect folks who take every opportunity to trash what government can do. It's almost like hiring a mechanic who doesn't want your car to run. You want to have people in these positions that want to make government work for people. It doesn't do that on a lot of different levels, but it doesn't mean that it can't if we invest the right amount of resources and energy into making it work for everybody. And part of that is talent recruitment and retention. And just like in any other business or industry, if you're going to attract the best and the brightest, you've got to pay them what they're worth, and you've got to treat them like professionals. And for far too long, we have neglected to do that with our public servants in state government. And not only are you not going to attract the best talent, you're not going to be able to keep the talent that you have. They're going to go off to another industry that can pay them what they're worth. And so this is it's not just the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do if we want our government to operate at peak effectiveness and efficiency.
That's a really heartening statement. Thank you. Thank you on behalf of state employees. Do you feel that you have a chance, or will you be asking for an opportunity to be on one of the Appropriations Committee, most especially, that would have some decision-making role vis-a-vis state employee pay?
We haven't figured out what committee assignments we're going to request for the next session. That's something that we'll have to take a look at with our team and our colleagues as we get closer. But in the past session, I served not only on the Public Education Committee and the Juvenile Justice Committee, but I also served on the Calendars Committee. And as you know,
that's for those, you might comment on how important that committee is. The average listener might not be aware of how very important that committee is in the House. Right. Uniquely to the House.
That's right. So the Appropriations Committee, writes the state budget. The Education Committee passes policies for 5.5 million Texas school children. And you've got other big committees that do substantive work like that. But there's procedural committees, in particular the Calendars Committee, that decides if any of those bills passed by those other committees get to the floor to be voted on and become law. The Calendars Committee is kind of the gatekeeper for what passes and what doesn't in the Texas House.
And it prioritizes which bills can come up first. Yeah,
that's exactly right. So I hope to serve on that committee again and hope to be of service to public employees in that role like I was last session.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess that may be it for now. We really absolutely. I know you're very busy. You're still a state representative.
That's
You
right.
still have a very busy schedule, and
I
we very much appreciate you taking this time and your obvious interest in state employees and retirees alike. Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you for meeting with me and adjusting around our schedule. I'm going to head back into the Capitol and get back to this hearing and continue to do my best to serve our public employees and through them our constituents that we all swear an oath to protect and to serve.
Thank you very much, Representative. Thank you.
Thank you so much.